It is truly an honor to introduce to you a woman I love, I admire, and who continues to inspire me. Given my relationship with our speaker, this introduction may sound a bit unconventional. For many diplomats, activists, and professionals around the world, Madame Gbowee is best known for coordinating a group of Muslim and Christian women who played an essential role in ending Liberia's devastating 14 years of civil war. Madame Gbowee was recognized to share the 2011 Nobel Peace Prize for the pivotal role she played in ending the war. She was also very instrumental to ensuring that the process of disarming and rehabilitating child soldiers was successful. She continues to be praised for her bravery and resilience. She does not relent when there is a need to speak truth to power. 2011 Nobel Peace Prize laureate Leymah Gbowee is a Liberian peace activist, social worker, and women's rights advocate. She is the founder and president of the Gbowee Peace Foundation Africa, based in Monrovia, Liberia. She is also a founding member and was the Liberian coordinator of the Women in Peacebuilding Network. During the early phase of her professional journey, Madame Gbowee knew that when the peace and security of any society is in jeopardy, women, regardless of religious affiliation, suffer the most. For this reason, she needed to build rapport with her Muslim sisters, which she did, thus leading to the birth of the mass action of peace movement. Madame Gbowee is a proud wife and mother of 7 children. Nevertheless, she has many children like myself and families around the world. Many young girls like myself see Madame Gbowee as a mother, a mentor, a friend, a sister, etc. She is a person that is filled with a kind of humility that is difficult to see in our leaders today. And I must add, this is something that we secretly have conversations about her every time. When there is an opportunity that will empower women and young people, she makes it her priority to share with everyone, regardless of their social class and status. She enjoys having long conversations and sharing life stories with the young people. I can't tell you the number of times our speaker will put time aside and get on the phone with her girls just to know the G's, as we call it in Liberia. As busy as it gets, she squeezes in time to support her staff, her scholars, and her mentees. She doesn't make excuses for any opportunity to inspire young people. This woman is blunt. She is straightforward, God-fearing, honest. She hates when anyone is treated with injustice. Madame Gbowee holds a Master of Arts in Conflict Transformation from the Eastern Maryland University. She has also received multiple Doctors of Law honors from universities in Canada, Mozambique, and South Africa. In 2003, she was named a Distinguished Fellow in Social Justice, a visiting transitional fellow at the Center of Research on Women, and fellow in residence at the Athena Center for Leadership Studies of Bernard College. Ladies and gentlemen, from everyone watching from wherever you are, welcome 2011 Nobel laureate, the president of Gbowee Peace Foundation Africa and Liberia, Madame Leymah Gbowee.
Thank you, Georgia. Right now, before I start, I think everyone should say a prayer that the internet in my house holds up because it's nerve wracking at 8 p.m. or somewhat. That's when it decides to misbehave. But I'm going to go, if I go off, just realize that I am determined to end this webinar. I will come back on. Today is Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day to every woman on this platform, everyone around the world. Thank you for teaching us to walk boldly. I would like to start by saying thank you to the University of Albany, to Janelle and her team, to Georgia for the fantastic introduction. I'm always proud of her, and every time I see her, I think back to our first interaction many years ago that would make me to feel like a dinosaur if I call the year. So in 1989, it was my final year of high school. And we graduated one day after graduation. Liberia went into a civil war. And from 1989 up until 2003, we saw Liberia move from bad to worse to ridiculous. I grew up in a social setting where children were catered to, people were taken care of, communities were in charge of the daily existence of everyone. We live in a scenario that the South Africans would call Ubuntu. Everyone mattered. And so that was my socialization. And then the war came, and the war came and challenged my socialization. It challenged the very core of my existence when divisions were being heard, was being put out as the new normal. I was restless, I was sad, I was angry. And for many years, I thought to myself, there is a need for this to change. All of that changed in 1997 when I came back home as a refugee, and this will be my third time coming back home from refugee life. Came back home and started to do some work with child soldiers. But prior to moving into the refugee life, I had been working with women in my community, even though myself was a victim of domestic violence. I put my pains aside every morning, put a smile on my face, and took on the role as an advocate in my community for young girls and for people who were disadvantaged, especially women who were suffering a similar fate that I was suffering domestic violence. In 1997, I had my first opportunity to continue working. By 1998, I started working with child soldiers. These were the young people that I hated the most. But it was also, I feel like God was preparing me for this long journey that I've been on all of these years. I met them, engaged with them. The mindset that I had about these people changed. I thought they were the worst people, but then I realized that they were as much victims as I was. I wanted to see the women that they had gotten married to. I wanted to see the girls that were having babies by them. And once I started working with their families, working with them, I became inspired. Eventually, my job morphed into working with women in the security sector and then working with women at the regional level on issues of peace and conflict. As I continued to travel this journey, one thing was sure: the war wasn't ending. We weren't seeing peace. Rape and abuse were at its highest. Our young children were being conscripted on a daily basis as they walked to school. One of the turning points for me was traveling up to the southeastern part of Liberia, coming back in a truck, going in this pickup in this village, and we were stopped. And a truck came and just picked every young person they were thrown in that truck. This was unbelievable to me. I came back from that trip and decided I did not want to do case work again, social work again. I was going to start the Women Peace Building Network. And that was the beginning of a journey that would lead me to the Nobel, that would lead me to University of Albany, and that would lead me to the world. We started this work with $10 in our pocket. We started this work as 7 women. We had knowledge of who we were going a few years ago when we sat down as a group to really unpack why we were successful. One person responded, we were successful because we were naive. After starting this work, we decided we will end the war, come hell or high water. The first thing we did on that first day was to write a statement and send it to the media. And to Georgia and Janelle, if you're still hearing me because I'm worried, just send me a reaction so that I know that I'm still being heard. So we started. We did a we did a position statement and sent it to the press. But as we wrote that statement, one of the things that was very clear to us: who do we say wrote this statement? And usually people like to, especially in the day and age of social media where we can sit behind our computers and take on different names and write all kinds of things. In those days, people were saying, oh, let's just write a blanket Women of Liberia. My response to that was that we are really, really, really going to be cheating You can't build peace on falsehood. We're 7 women in a room. How do we write women of Liberia? We don't even represent 0.001% of the population as we sit in this room. If we're really serious about peace, let's name ourselves. So the 7 of us signed that position statement. And that statement was essentially calling for immediate unconditional ceasefire, a fruitful dialogue between the warring parties, and the deployment of an international intervention force. One of the things that made it extremely important when that, or maybe frightening to those who were reading the statement the next day in the media, was because those were the 3 things that President Taylor had said he was not going to do. That Liberia was a sovereign nation and he would not negotiate, that he was a legitimate government, he would not negotiate with the warring faction, that Liberia was a sovereign nation, he would not allow international intervention force to come, and that the 3rd thing when we're asking for ceasefire, that he was going to fight until the last soldier died. So in essence, we were 7 women in a room with $10 challenging. So everyone is talking about choosing to challenge. We were challenging one of the most brutal dictators in Africa. We put this statement out, and everything went the next day. Media people were looking for us, wanted to know who we were. Our group grew from 7 to 20 something to 65 to 250 to about 1,000, and eventually we blew up. But one of the things that was very important for us was that we're very focused. We knew exactly what we wanted. Our goal was peace for Liberia. Nothing else mattered. We were not interested in funding. We were not interested in travels. We were not interested in anything. We wanted to travel. We wanted to build peace. The other thing that is important to note as I make this presentation is that we also had to build a movement from the ground up. Most times people talk about, oh, we're building a women's movement, or we're women's, or how do you start a women's movement, or what do you do with a group of women? We had to go into a room and spend many days and hours and weeks re-socializing. What do I mean by re-socializing? Because one of the issues that we have to deal with was here in this presentation is feminist organizing. Re-socializing because there were Christian women and Muslim women. And you will note that faith is one of the things that really and truly disempower women, or most faith tradition, because of all of these verses we have in scripture. I'm a Christian. I love Jesus. But there are many churches that will say, use scripture references to disempower women or to keep women down. So all of these women have been trained to believe that women are not supposed to do this, women are not supposed to do that. So one of the first things we did was to use the Bible and the Quran to counter that. Bring women from the Bible. Let's talk about Deborah. Deborah is a prophetess. She was a judge. She was a warrior, and she was also a wife. But she was the one who fought for one of the warriors who fought for the redemption of the people of the children of Israel. Let's look at Khadijah, the wife of the prophet Muhammad, peace be to him. Khadijah was a businesswoman. She was rich. She was out there. And as a business person, you had to engage. You had to be political to do the things that she did. So we went on and on with all of these women. And basically, we also have to deconstruct the myth and the misconceptions that these women had about each other's faith. Oh, Christians cannot sit with Muslims. They were using scripture references like, what fellowship does light have with darkness? And all of these different things, we had to break it down. At the end of it, what we wanted to do was to peel off all of those barriers that will hinder them from working together and really expose us to who we really were. And who we were women, that our cries were the same, that when a bullet entered a room filled with women, regardless of your religious affiliation, political affiliation, or economic status, the bullet will not ask you whether you were a Christian or a Muslim, or whether you were this or you were that. That bullet will fire and it will hit whoever stood in his way. So once we got these women to peel off all of those things, got them to accept each other, all of us to accept all of the baggages that we came with, the point now was, let's move out. Let's start building peace. Let's go out there and re-socialize other women. to understand that it's not just men make war and men should bring peace, that women also have a stake in building peace. And so most times when people talk about the women of Liberia mass action for peace, there's always this thing, oh, they went and they prayed. Yes, we did. They fasted. Yes, we did. But we're even more strategic than that. When the movement started, one of the things we were cognizant of was that there are always conflict in these small groups that tend to disintegrate the group. So every day that we work, every blessed day that we protested, those of us who were the leaders went into a room at the end of the day and we had three questions we asked ourselves. What did we do wrong? What did we do right? How can we be better? And it took going to do my master's in conflict transformation to actually understand that this is strategic peace building by the textbook. But here we were, a vast majority of uneducated women and semi-educated women doing strategic peace building without even knowing that we're doing strategic peace building. We decided we'd tackle it from everywhere. Most often, women went to the peace, and the government and the warring faction went to the peace table, and they would come back, and women would celebrate. But we wanted to follow this process. So that's the other thing: consistency, persistence, commitment to a process. Even though we weren't getting any money, but we decided we would still go. So with small money, $5,000, we bought tickets. 7 of us went to Ghana. But it was also important for us that whilst we're in Ghana, the group of women would be in Liberia protesting. So whilst we're in Ghana, trying to build another movement of refugee women, of Liberian women living there, the group in Monrovia continued to protest. The one thing we said was that even in the midst of the war, if it was only one person on that airfield in white, let there be that one person, because the symbol of the women on that field was a symbol of hope. We went to Ghana, did all we had to do, including barricading the hall, including writing letters every day to the mediator to say, this is the way we think it should go. We got on committees on militarism to tell them how we thought the new army should look like, the new police should look like. Because for us, any nation that has gone to war and is about to do peace, you cannot do peace by leaving off 49% or 50% of the population and think you have done peace. So in most nations around the world, when people talk about women's inclusion or women's involvement in peace building process, helps the process to last 10 years longer than processes where women were not involved with, is because you cannot do peace in a state of injustice, because leaving women out, women who are part of the society, is unjust. So you can't build peace on the foundation of injustice, on the foundation of exclusion, on the foundation of, oh, you don't know anything, you're not credentialed enough, so you can't be a part of this process. So we were into their faces in the space and saying, you have to take us seriously. When the peace agreement was signed, we raised an issue. You're giving a nation of almost 50% illiterate people a document that is over 300 pages, and you expect them to read it? So we're asking the mediators and the negotiators, can you kindly set benchmarks in this peace document? The comprehensive, they call it the comprehensive peace agreement. No one listened to us. Did we just sit back and fold our hands? No. We got to Monrovia, invited 80 women leaders, took that peace agreement, unpacked it. We had one expert come, sit with us, and we set benchmarks based on every chapter, everything that was supposed to be done, gave those women the benchmarks with dates and times and activities that were supposed to be happening around there, and say, if you don't see this happening, protest in your community. So that was the way we were able to really monitor the implementation of the peace agreement. So gradually it came to disarmament, demobilization, disarmament, it came to reintegration, it came to civic and voters education, and then it came to elections. And we were also really, really cognizant of the fact that our history as a nation has never really favored women in politics. Liberia gained her independence in 1847. Women, especially property owners, or women and indigenous women property owner were only allowed to vote in the 1950s. The question you want to ask yourself, in the 1950s, how many women in a tiny country like Liberia owned property that they would be able to vote? So we know that that exclusion in the political space had been there. When it came time for voters registration, we went back to the UN and those who were in charge to say, hey, 5 days is too small, or 10 days is too small. You need to take it to like 20 days so that we can get women involved. And they were like, no, we don't have funding for it. If women want to vote, they will have to go and register. First 5 days after voters registration, the percentage of women that had registered was very dismal. So what we decided to do, these people are not changing, and then they called me to a meeting at the UN to say, oh, we're seeing that women are not registering to vote. What can you do? We mobilized women across the country and said we have to go out to register women to vote. We carry babies on our backs. We sat in shops while women went to register. We washed clothes, we cooked. I was in the office with more than 10 cell phones, taking calls from here, calling the elections commissions to say we've lost and we don't have ink here. There's no camera to take picture on this side. It was a busy 5 days. But by the time we had done this work all across Liberia, when the data came, they had registered 50 plus one more women than men for the 2005 elections. Of course, we went to elections. President Sirleaf became the first female president elected in Africa. So once we finished that work, we decided there were other things. So we need to end the group. We need to do this. We need to do that. But there were other groups who were doing things. The Association of Female Lawyers came back to say, hey, let's do a bill on rape. They did a bill. We mobilized behind that bill. Parliament passed the bill. The transitional president signed it into law before he left office. Then there was an inheritance bill that we all mobilized around, and they were able to do that. Today, where are we? Today is International Women's Day. Today, there are all kinds of jargon, choose to challenge, choose to do this, choose to do that, and all of those things. One of the things that I would like to say to the audience listening here is, yes, we can choose to challenge, or yes, we can have all of these campaigns on social media, but all of these elaborate celebration today was a head-spinning day. For many years now, maybe 3, 4, 5 years, this is the first International Women's Day I've spent in Liberia, and the fanfare. Because if you live in Africa, you see we like our colorful dresses. So you go into this program, oh, this group is wearing purple, and this group is wearing orange, and this group. So you have all these beautiful dresses like the rainbow all out here today. Different corporations are having International Women's Day celebration. This other group, I told myself, I will go to one celebration, have lunch with a group of young people, spend time talking with them, and then I'll come home and prepare for this webinar. But all over the place, there's spoken word thing at different restaurants tonight. Different things are happening all over the place. The question we must ask ourselves in the midst of all of these, what is going to be the change, the transformation for the rights of women? So today I sat on a panel and they asked the question, how is it that the women were successful in 2003 to 2005 to end the war, and today it's difficult for the women to be successful in building peace? In ending rape. My response is simple. A few years ago, we came together in a reunion of the Women of Liberia Mass Action for Peace. And in this very house, because I'm sitting in my house, so we sat down, we ate, and then the women wanted to know. My question to them was, why did we succeed? Why did we succeed at something that a lot of women are finding difficult to do? And one of my colleagues' response was that we're stupid. So it wasn't like we're stupid as in dumb, but we were naive. We didn't know airports, a lot of travel. So our movement was very local. And a lot of us didn't have, we knew about travels, but the interest was not in outside. The interest was in ending the war so that people like Georgia could have the opportunities that they have now. Ending the war so that my children could have the life that I had growing up. Ending the war so that rape was not a commonplace in our society. So we stuck it out. But today, we find it extremely difficult for groups, whether it's in DR Congo, whether it's in Cameroon, whether it's in the US, with all of the multiple groups, we find it very difficult to see groups come together because one, there are just too many languages that people use to divide. And most often when I'm in a lecture with students in class, I go on the chalkboard and I say, okay, you are fighting for the rights for LGBTQI people, right? Yes, and we write it down. You're fighting for the housing justice, yes. You're fighting for homelessness, yes. You're fighting for pay equity, yes. You're fighting for Black Lives Matter, yes. The question I need to ask you and you and you and all of you who are fighting for these different things, what is the end goal? Or the end goal is human rights and justice. So why is it that it's so difficult for you all to collaborate and work together in the interest of whatever goal you are all fighting for? Because at the end of the day, it's almost like we're all on a journey. I'm fighting for peace, you're fighting for women's rights, you're fighting for housing justice. So we're on this narrow path. But in front of us, there are many demons that we have to fight. If we stand together and loop arms collectively, like we did as the Women of Liberia Mass Action for Peace, we are definitely going to get to where we need to get to. But if we decide to conquer those demons individually, singularly, they will tackle you down and then tackle the next person down and tackle the other person down. And before you know it, all of you on this journey to human rights and justice are exhausted, haven't done anything, able to come together. That's the first thing. The second thing is, in our advocacy today and our activism today, there's a lot of interest in self-elevation. So you say, oh, I'm fighting for the rights of children. How the hell do you go and post a picture of you beside a dead child, of you smiling? Put a smiling picture of you besides a child who have been brutally treated by his family. And then you say, oh, we are fighting for this child's justice. That's the other thing. So a lot of these things, all of the sectional way with which activism happen makes it impossible for us to achieve the kind of success that the Women of Liberia achieved. A few months back, I was in Cameroon working with some of the women, and I saw some exceptional women's group, some young women who reminded me of the young Leymah in 2003. The saddest part for me was their inability to stay on the ground and work. One meeting they were being called to Washington to talk, and the next meeting they were being called to Geneva, and the next meeting. And so I sat with this group and said to some of the members, you will never build peace in your country, in your context, if you keep flying all over the place. The peace that you seek is locally. And we were able to get that peace because we stayed local, we engaged locally. Our mindset was about transforming the dynamics in our community. So today, as we celebrate International Women's Day, and to all of the young women under the sound of my voice, the one thing that I can say to you all is there is never a moment in my life that I ever think that I did it by myself. I remember watching the film that was done by Oprah Winfrey about Dr. King's life, and crossing the bridge, Selma, that's the name of the movie. At one insignificant scene, not even a scene, well, I can't say insignificant, my apologies for the use, but there was a scene where they were sitting around the table and just talking, and I just broke down and started crying. I was sitting watching this movie with a friend, and this was like, why? I said, because around that table, I see a Vaba, I see an Asat, I see a Asatu, I see a Sugars, I see it at that moment. I'm not saying I'm Dr. King, but I'm just saying if you're an activist and you've worked so hard for something authentically, there is not a single work that has been done that you won't see similar traits, and I could see it around that table. But today, and each and every one of these individuals that I could see around that table are individuals who brought different kinds of ingredients into whatever soup we were cooking, which was at the end we wanted to serve the Liberian people peace. So it's not like, oh, she. No, the narrative will be they, them, us. And that's what we should fight for as women, fighting to tackle things that we can do collectively. The second thing that I want to say, or maybe it's the third or fourth thing, is that everyone is moving around talking about choose to challenge. Do they really understand what it takes to choose to challenge? It's a lonely place. You never get invited to anything nationally. People always think that you are the worst. You have to stand firm for what you believe. You can't speak all out of the corner of your mouth. My mentor at Twitter, Cooper, was one person who stood up to Taylor. And the story around Liberia at that time was that Taylor has said to people, of all of the women doing activism in this country, and this is long before we came in the scene, my greatest respect is for a tweeter, because she told me she didn't like me, and she's never ever tried to like me. I rather that kind of person. She stood her ground. Whether she didn't have a car, whether she didn't have a security, whether she didn't have food, she promised herself that she could never engage with him because he wasn't a nice president. So choosing to challenge means that you too, your life will be challenged. There are moments in this country where people tend to ask me, don't you feel bad about the way people talk about you, think about you? I say, well, those are the costs that I counted before I decided I would be an activist. And on a daily basis, before I speak, I sit down and I do my own analysis of what is going to cost me to challenge a particular issue. So the young people out here, let it not just be a jargon raising your left hand and say choosing to challenge. Choosing to challenge means you will anger some very powerful people. Many people have chosen to challenge at the peril of their lives. So this choose to challenge is not a new phrase, it's not a new thing. But to this new generation, to this generation of young people, do you even know what you're getting into when you decide to choose to challenge? In 2003, we stood up, we challenged the status quo, we refused to be bullied back into our homes. We spoke out as women of Liberia, and at the end of the day, we were able to deliver peace to our people. For the last years, from 2003 till today, we're still enjoying some of the fruits of the ending of the violence in our country. Today, of all days, we're recognized around the world for the work that we've done. But is it over? No, because we're still challenging. We're still standing up to patriarchy. We're still trying to change the social status that is unfavorable to women. Today, we're still pushing for our daughters to be free from sexual violence and gender-based violence. We're still challenging many things, including corruption in our government. Today, we're challenging anything that is impacting the lives of women. As we celebrate International Women's Day, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we think about the Liberian women, their crisis, their feminist organizing, the peace that they were able to bring to their nation, may we never forget that it was a labor of love, a labor of commitment, a labor of resilience. But core, at the center of it all, was a labor that had to do with the collective humanity of the Liberian people. Today, as we choose to challenge, let's choose to challenge in a way that will bring humanity closer to peace than drive us apart based on different jargons and different languages. I thank you, and I'll take questions.
Oh, thank you so much, Madam Barry, for that really powerful talk. And it looks like you could either post your questions in the Q&A, or you can also raise your hand. It looks like I'm able to enable your microphones to be unmuted and allow you to talk and share your concerns. So I'll be looking to see who's raising their hands and who's posting in the Q&A or even in the chat. So a few people have already
Someone had a
posted.
question, Janelle.
Yes?
One question that came was, did you seek the development of local leadership capacity
Yes.
and local women's leadership? Was the decision making participatory in the movement? Oh, definitely.
Mm.
We never went to bed unless we agreed. So let me give you an idea. The mass action was a movement of different groups. So every group had a representative. So at one point, we're probably 25 or more leaders around the table on a daily basis. When it came to money, when it came to programs, we had to have it was always based on consensus before we made the next move. There was never a decision that was taken, but one thing that you need to understand as the leader of the group, when the decisions fell apart, they blame me. When it was a success, they claim the credit. So most of the tensions that we had, especially me saying, I don't want to be a leader of this group anymore, was because no one ever praised me. In terms of developing local leadership capacity and local women's leadership, we did. But one of the things that we knew we had to do first, we were we knew that the personal was political. And a lot of these women, the issues that they were dealing with had nothing to do with speaking up or anything like that. We needed to deal with all of the issues that they were working on. So we had our healing circle to help them exhale. One of the ways I describe how women suffer in conflict situation, just close your eyes and imagine a brand new sponge. If you take that sponge and put it outside and try to suck in water or mud or anything, over time the sponge is very heavy and is almost at a breaking point. And that's what happens to women in conflict context. Most times we carry all of the pains and grief from what we have seen, what we've experienced, but also we have to be strong to find food, to cater to the neighbors, to cater to children. So as part of our movement, we knew that you don't give what you don't have. So in order for the women to give peace, they too had to have peace. So most often we sit around a circle, give them the opportunity to talk about the pains, cry it out, and do a healing circle for them. And in that way, they could breathe easily and go back out to do the work that they needed to do. We also spent time talking about being a woman, what are some of, so we did keep local training based on our means. And those, I will tell you, were the best times in my career
Mm.
because it was simple, it was clear, and there was not a lot of expectation. All these women wanted to do was to move on.
Okay. All right, thank you. There are a number of raised hands and some questions in the Q&A and chat. I'm going to go to one of our raised hands, Karen. I'm allowing you to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah. Um, Thanks for taking my question. I am humbled by your leadership and your genius. My question is: so we're past the point of naivete. we're smart, we think we know everything, and we still need to make these accomplishments. And like you said, we are all looking for human rights and justice, whether it's for the environment, whether it's for women, whether it's for children, whether it's for Black, whether it's for white, or whether it's for Indigenous. How do we get past the fear or the knowledge that we have, that because we've been doing this for so long? How do we get back to that newness?
I
That's
think
the question.
one of the things that we need to understand is that life as it is, even conflict or the issues that we're fighting to eradicate or to manage in our daily existence, those issues are dynamic, they are not static. One day you wake up and what you see as a terrible case of, let me just say, rape, the next day, especially for those of us living in the regions that we live in, you see something that you, you see something one day and you say, okay, I've seen this and I can never be shocked. And then the next day you see something and you go, oh my God, I thought I would never be shocked. So if you're seeing the perpetrators of evil are devising new ways of committing atrocities at levels that shock us, one of the things we as activists need to do is to be open to shift our practices and our strategies to say, let's see how we too can counter this. You cannot be countering issues in 2021 with ideas from 1991. It's not going to work. You have to be current in whatever. That's why we need young minds with old minds coming together and saying, how can we? But most times in a movement, we have two things impacting us. The old minds are still stuck in where they find themselves, and the young minds are too arrogant to want to be mentored or to even partner. So sometimes that's where we find ourselves. And so you have this problem of each of us need each other, but no one is prepared to stand down for the other to take on. So for me, I feel like moving forward, intergenerational interaction, intergenerational strategic building, intergenerational brainstorming sessions on how to manage some of the issues that we're dealing with. Who would have thought when Wangari Maathai was alive and fighting for the environment that a little girl called Greta would come up? If Wangari was around today, I think one of the things she would do is to sit, or would be the best that would have happened for her and Greta to sit together and say, how can we manage this climate crisis? So the issues are there, is evolving, it's not waiting for us. The problem we have is we are waiting or still using strategies that are totally irrelevant to the current tide. Let me just read. Someone say, how did you overcome fear to do what is needed? It's not that you're never afraid. I had many moments of being afraid. But the one thing that I always knew was that I was never going to allow fear to stop me. One, because I had a solid support of women around me. If you watch Pray the Devil Back to Hell, one of the defining moments in that whole movement was me going to Taylor, challenging him with my speech, refusing the chair he offered for me to sit down. And that night, people were afraid that indefinitely we got calls that soldiers were going to come to my house. I slept in that house. But how did I sleep? My entire neighborhood was up. People sat on my porch, boys were interacting. So if anyone was going to come to take me out, they had to take the entire neighborhood out. So that's the first thing. The second thing is sometimes when we allow fear to stop us is because we're thinking about ourselves, thinking about what we are expected to get. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
We are thinking about what was expected to get. When I won the Nobel Peace Prize, one of the first individuals I sat with was Desmond Tutu. And the one thing he said to me was, Leymah, you know why Madiba was great? Referring to Nelson Mandela. And I said, no. He said Madiba was great because it was never about him. It was about the constituent. So he was able to spend 27 years in jail. not because he didn't have a way, not because offers were not made for him to get out of prison, but because his people needed to be freed. And so that's when you are an activist, it's not that you're not afraid, but look behind you. How many people have put their lives in your hands? And so in that moment, or in those moments, you never let fear stop you. What advice to women in a society that limited opportunity, with limited opportunity to choose to challenge? Oh my God. We all come from societies that have limited opportunities to choose to challenge. You have to determine what it is that you want to challenge. Because I think in every society, it comes back to strategy. How do you want to? In 1998, 99, 2000, 2001, no one in Liberia could talk about FGM. No one could publicly come outside to talk about FGM. You were shunned. You were threatened when you open your mouth to talk about FGM. But it was a subtle, in the corner conversation gradually. I told someone today that our problem now is that we want everything to be broadcasted. We want everything to be on social media for likes. I was talking to a member of parliament on Friday, and I said to him, he was coming to a program I hosted at my office. And he said, why International Women's Day? I said, primarily, but to also celebrate those women who have been working in the front line to change some of the dynamics that women are faced with. And he asked me, this is one of the most educated member of parliaments we have in Liberia. And he said to me, what are the plights of women? Was I shocked? No. Was I angry? No. So I took my time. I said to him on Saturday, a lady left her house and gave her cell phone to her son and said, I'm going to charge my phone. I'll come back. He didn't see his mother again until Monday morning when they discovered her body gruesomely murdered. I say a little girl was raped by her uncle. They decided not to take the uncle to prison. Rather, they took the little girl to a church so she could confess on why she had this demon that enticed men. And I went on to tell him simple stories about things happening in Liberia on his watch as a member of parliament. And he said to me, no one has ever explained this way to me. Every time people come to me, they bring me languages from the West, and it seems like a far away issue. But no one, yes, mind you, he has read some of these stories in the newspaper. But the question is, did anyone, or it was like, okay, this is a far off thing. No one really brought it home and made it personal. So we can all choose to challenge. How we do that is the point.
Okay. I have two raised hands from Heidi and then Stephanie. And then afterwards, we have some more questions. I'll probably read them through since, we're now getting into past the hour. So there are 5 questions in the Q&A. So Heidi, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Wonderful, Ms. Leymah. It is my pleasure to be on this call today. I am Heidi Iyok. I'm from Cameroon. And I have followed you since you won the Nobel Prize. Congratulations, good work you have been doing. And I was also very happy when you said that you have been to Cameroon because we have the Anglophone crisis going on in Cameroon. I was happy to hear that you've engaged with some of the women on the ground in Cameroon. The question I have for you is that for somebody like me, my interest is bringing healthcare to the people who cannot afford it. So I know you've worked in Ghana and different parts of Africa. So it's not as much as peace and politics. It's like, how do we still break through all those barriers of politics to get people the health care that they need, especially women and children, because there was a situation with a woman, maternal mortality is still very high in Cameroon, and there was a woman who actually died right in front of the hospital, and her children were still alive, and her relatives were trying to open up her stomach to get the kids out. So how would you help or advise somebody like me who would like to go and help with things like that? Thank you.
Well, first thing first, Heidi, let me say this one thing to you. Healthcare is peace. Because if we continue to define peace as the end of war, we'll never really get it. So today, let me offer my definition of peace to you. Peace is not just the absence of war. Peace is the presence of every condition that dignifies you and I. So what are those conditions that dignifies you and I? Healthcare. Of course, a mama in Cameroon is not dignified if she cannot afford to take her child to well baby clinic, or she cannot afford medication, or there are no hospitals around for her. Maternal mortality is a peace issue. Education, quality education is a peace issue. So all of the things that dignifies you or that makes you to feel like you're a dignified human being, those are things that are peace issues. So how do you engage or embrace? I just gave you a scenario of me and a member of parliament. And I can tell you that if we try to move away in all of our advocacy from too much of a theoretical conversation, we'll never really win this war. Okay. I know that some of the biggest gains that I've made in my work is being able to simplify some of these huge concepts by bringing true life stories to those individuals that, are in charge or responsible for this. Today again, I met another member of parliament by accident, and he wanted something from me and I wanted something from him, but we sat down and I said to him, look, we are having this crisis about the region that I come from in Liberia, upper, lower, all of these sectional things. I said to him, I am prepared to chair a committee. I am prepared to put my name on something with you if you're prepared to start that particular kind of work. He looked at me, stretched his eyes and said, for real? I said, for real. He said, for real? I said, for real. So most of the times it's alliance building. Where we miss it as women and as feminists is we have this concept or this misconception that if you partner with men to do some work, you're not feminist enough. No. Everyone needs allies in spaces and places that will make things happen for you. Why are men able to do the things that they want to do in different times and spaces when we are fighting to do it? It's because they build alliances. So the language, building alliance, partnership, networks, and all of those different things will make it happen for you, Heidi.
Okay, thank you for your question, Heidi. Now, Stephanie, could you unmute yourself? I saw your hand was raised.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for such an inspiring talk. We feel so empowered. I wanted to ask about, you mentioned that a lot of the youth today want to be broadcasted. And while you were traveling in Cameroon, you also noticed a lot of the women were often traveling abroad to talk. And we were under the impression that that was the best strategy to bring international attention to local issues. I was wondering if you had other recommendation of better strategy to do the work locally, and also what the diaspora can do from abroad to help people who are still back home in many African countries locally. Thank you.
You nail it on the head by saying diaspora. Find your allies in the diaspora. Give them your message and let them put it out there. I'll give you a story about Cameroon. These young women were doing fantastic work. And all of a sudden, someone got a scholarship to travel. You see, every movement have their Dr. King. Every movement have their Mandela. Every movement have that charismatic person that can take the message. And if the movement has introduced you to the world, you must be committed to that movement. How does a soldier in the middle of battle drop his weapon and say, I'm going to school, and once I've gotten the skills, I will come back? In the military world, they will charge you for AWOL. So, as a soldier for peace, how do you live after this movement? You were primarily non-existent to the world. It is this our quest for peace that makes people to know you. And in the middle of it, you say, I need to go to Harvard to get my master's degree. How do you sleep with yourself? When human beings are dying on a daily basis? Their travels are distractions. I'll give you a story. When we started the mass action. I have very young children. I did not have a job. The first donor I went to mobilize for resources for our campaign offered me $1,500 and a trip the very next week to the US for a leadership training course. My response, no. Because peace, in my opinion, will give me 10 times more than $1,500. The next time, 2003, when the Comprehensive Peace Agreement was signed, the guy who became president calls me immediately to say, I want you to come and work in the presidential office as one of my special aides on peace and justice. My response, no. 2 weeks later, we are calling you to ask you if you will serve as the chairperson of the board of the Liberia Petroleum Refinery Company. As a board chair, my board fee would have quadrupled anything I made at that time. My response, no. Because yes, we had gotten to the signing of the peace agreement. Yes, there was a deployment of the intervention force, but our ultimate goal was to see the fullest implementation of the peace agreement. So the strategy is not just start the work, gain notoriety, and then fly out, or gain notoriety and keep going and coming, going and coming. One of the things that I struggle with as someone who shuttles between Ghana, Liberia, and New York is that I tell people I am not 100% a typical Liberian anymore. Because for every moment I leave this country for 2 weeks, I miss out on some of the local things. So I have to come back and catch up. Imagine peace. You're doing peace work and you leave for 2 years. How do you come back and catch up? So that's the point that I'm making to you.
All right. Thank you for that answer, and thank you for that question, Stephanie. So in our Q&A, we have 5 questions. I'm going to read them all out loud, and then I'll have you respond. I think because of due to time issues, I won't be asking for any more questions, so we'll just go through these. Also, I did get a question that came in earlier, so I also want to add that question at the end. So, John Kusich, to what extent are former child soldiers still being reintegrated to society? Brianna Lynch, thank you for this lecture. My question is, what were, in your experiences, the biggest challenges organizing across religions? Tarana's question, what advice do you give to women in a society with limited opportunity to choose to challenge? And then Jada's question is, would you consider your activism and leadership your purpose? And if so, when did you come to this realization?
Well, I'll answer Jada's question first. Whether activism and leadership is my purpose. I think my purpose is to do God's work by using my voice to speak up against injustice. I don't see what I do as a day's job. I see it as my call from God. And every day I tell people, and I tell God that this is my call. You called me like you call someone to be a teacher, a preacher, a carpenter, or a scientist. You've called me to use my voice. And you just need to help me on this journey. So that's what I think my call is. In Liberia, there are so many competing priorities. Sadly, former child soldiers are really at the bottom of the list. The biggest challenge of organizing across religion was most times people were using scriptures, especially Christians, to kind of like move away from the collaborative effort. As a Christian, most people ask me which group was the most difficult to deal with. I say the Christians were the most difficult to deal with because they have a lot of biblical scriptures that they can use so the difficulty was especially when we call fast, and the Muslim have a different way of doing their fast and the Christian have a different way of doing their fast. So sometimes it was just tiny but never issues that we never overlook. We took all of those issues to be important and walked through them and dealt with them. Especially in a society where social norms and gender stereotypes are so prevalent and straight on women who are restricted to go beyond the bar made up, pursue their educational and professional goals. What advice will you give to women with limited opportunities? I think I answered this question. I said I don't think we have limited opportunities anywhere, especially in society. Yeah, so
Okay.
I think I did. Janelle? You're muted.
Thank you for catching that. I'm sorry. All right, there was a final question that came in earlier. This is from John and Lynn Kusich. So much of Liberia's infrastructure remains in ruins since the end of the Civil War, and the resources available to the healthcare and educational systems remain terribly insufficient. How do you see the future stability of Liberia, and has China's influence now surpassed that of the USA?
Well, Liberia is a very complicated place. Is the politics of our nation is complicated. Um, Even the whole conversation around infrastructure, we're challenged in terms of really finding leaders at every level. Very few who are patriotic, who are love Liberia more than they love their bank accounts. Um, so we find ourselves in a very sad predicament that regime after regime, there are these challenges that just push people further and further into a state of apathy as it relates to governance and their lives ever improving. Today I was listening to a Christian radio station on my drive home, and one of the questions by the presenter on the radio station was, "Where is hell?" And from that drive of almost 2 hours from town to my house, including in traffic, maybe 80% of the callers said hell was Liberia. And I was very sad to listen to, because, and then she said, why do you all keep saying hell is Liberia? And one young boy who called said, because they're all, and he began to list all of the issues that he faced in his community. And I think when you think about these things, the only thing that comes to your mind is, how do we change this? How do we change these dynamics? And that's one of the reasons why I've spent a lot of my time mentoring young people. Georgia would tell you that as sweet as I am, I don't compromise on honesty and integrity, because I feel like the next generation of Liberians must be able to stand tall in that area. It's such a pride for me when people say she will never compromise her integrity. Imagine if We have 10,000 young people who are uncompromising when it comes to issue of corruption, when it comes to issues of justice and women's rights and all of these different things. Those would be the people who would change the dynamics of this nation. So my investment currently in education and leadership development and mentorship of young people is all geared towards changing this current wave of what we see happening. And it's going to take a lot of hands, not just one hand. It's going to take a lot of hands and commitment. And this is something that I'm committed to, trying to change that dynamic of where we find ourselves.
Okay, thank you. And I think I will try to end with just one final question, and this is my own question for you. And this is regards to the title Beyond Women's Leadership, because I was struck by your comments both during your lecture as well as during the Q&A when you talked about how we need to move away from the individual she to the collective, or the individual me to the collective we. And it's just reminding me of some of the conversations that we have had about feminist organizing, and not just feminist organizing, but like the larger issue of, do we need more women leaders? Do we need more women in public office? And I'm struck by the movement of women coming together to not only end the war, but also to elect the very first female president on the African continent. And I wanted to ask you, is that still a goal that we need to push for with regards to a woman leader? We have not had a woman president here in the US. Last year, there was much that was made that women leaders actually were some of the more effective heads of state when it came to handling the COVID pandemic. So I was just wondering about what you thought of that issue of a woman leader or leading, especially coming from a country that elected the first female president from the African continent.
Well, one of the things that I would say outrightly, and this may sound very biased, or I don't know how it will sound to people, is not that women are like that they don't have bad women leaders or all of the things, but I think in leadership, women are more thoughtful about the others. Um, for example, when we talk about at the peace table, you find women more concerned about the reopening of schools rather than getting the biggest position in government. They're more concerned about how do we get the hospitals up and running. So in my experience, it is that thoughtfulness that makes their leadership different and makes it more appealing to humanity. Yeah, that's what I would say. I mean, it's been 3 years since President Sirleaf left office. Um, it wasn't. There were many things that we wish she would have done, especially for the women and in different spheres that she didn't do. But if you look at her leadership and the current leadership we have, there's a stark difference, especially around different issues that I mentioned when it comes to peace. That peace is not just the absence of war, the presence of conditions that dignifies. So if you walk around here, there are many conditions that people live in that is not dignifying to their lives. I would say that outrightly. When people have not been paid for 5 months, having been paid. So those are the kinds of things. But a woman's leadership will be more concerned about how do we ensure that these people get what is due them at the end of every month, or how do we change this. So for me, that is the thoughtfulness. It's not that they're better in terms of their interaction, all of it, but they are more thoughtful about humanity.
Okay, so thank you. And I am going to have to wrap up now. It's 4:30. So thank you again, Madam Bowery, for your presence. Thank you for your lecture. Thank you to the attendees for your questions and for also being here and attending this webinar. And I hope that you can also join us for our upcoming lecture series. Thank you again. And thank you also, Georgia Johnson, for your wonderful introduction. and also for being a recipient of Madam Bowie's legacy. I'm glad that you came through our program. So thank you, everyone. Until next time, thank you again. And happy International Women's Day.
Thank you, Janelle. Happy International Women's Day to all. Have a blessed evening.
Yes.
Thank you all for your work, for especially you for walking boldly and not walking on tiptoes.
Mhm.
Thank you, and to every young girl, walk loudly, leave a legacy, refuse to walk on tiptoes. Thank you. Good night. God bless you all.
All right, good night. Thank you.